There is no way for me to say this other than just to say what it is. This video is this guy's punishment. Welcome to the Storycraft Society. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Garmin. This is the Storycraft Society, and this week, like I said, is a punishment video. I don't want to make this video. I don't, but I have to. You want to know why? It's because I get nothing done if it's not in front of this camera, and I put the pressure of being like, well, you got to do it so that the people can see you doing it. If I don't do that, I don't get stuff done. So that's what we're doing this week, and specifically, dun, 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 it is related to this guy. Now, I found pictures of this on the foam modeling crafting group on Facebook. I'll throw that picture up on screen if I can find it, but that's what I based this off of. I didn't have any blueprints. I didn't have anything like that. I just made it by eye of what I saw, trying to recreate it because I liked the building so much. I only got to this point, and it's set up on that shelf for so long. Like so long, months and months and months, and I haven't gotten it finished. I need something that makes me get this finished, even if it's getting it finished in little, small amounts. So what we're going to be talking about today is something that A, I need to get done, but B, I think is actually a really neat and useful trick. I am gonna be talking about a new technique that I've found for doing shingles. On the channel so far, I have talked about the various different ways that I like to do shingles, and none of them are actually doing shingles. And because of how much detail I've put into this specific building, I want to do the shingles right. I don't want to half do it. I want to do it in a way that this building, I think, actually deserves being done. So, with no further ado, let's talk about what I already have done on this guy, and then let's talk about what I'm going to be doing to get it finished and shingled. So the first thing that I did to get the roofing all ready to go is I put on cut coffee stir sticks. Now what I really like about this is that it will give me the opportunity to make the shingles in the roof patchy, and you'll be able to see the wood sticking out underneath, and that always gives a little bit of added complexity and depth to the roof. Not only do I like doing that because it gives a little complexity to the roof, it also gives me opportunities to cheat when it comes to doing my shingling so that I don't have to lay the entire roof in shingles. I can leave patches and it still looks good that way. Then it was time to paint them because it's going to be really hard to get them painted after I get all of my shingles on. So I actually just pulled out Army Painter. Ooh, I'm forgetting what color it is. 1 second. I found it. I was gonna say that it was an Army Painter speed paint, but it's not. It's actually a contrast paint. Snakebite leather is the color that I used. And then with that said, it was ready to move on to the shingles. So to get started, we're gonna pull out all of the things that we're gonna need to do these shingles. So the first thing is gonna be, I'm gonna break out some paper plates. I pulled out 3, and honestly, this was just a size guesstimate. I was like, how big do I think of a surface area I need to cover, and then how much will each paper plate cover? There's no math to it. It's just, I made a guess, and we'll see later if I'm right. As far as tools go, I pulled out a pair of scissors. I pulled out a steel wire brush, specifically a steel wire brush, because brass wire brushes and plastic wire brushes are not going to have enough rigidity, I guess, to get down into the paper plate without ripping it. I need something that makes lines, doesn't rip the paper. The final tool that I'm going to need is just a regular old fork, but the key here is to find one with the thinnest tines as possible. I think they're called tines. The little pointy things, make them as thin of points as possible, because that's going to make it that it gives you the finest looking, bigger wood texture. You'll see what I mean in a minute. The first thing that I have to do to start making these shingles is I've got to pull out my scissors and cut these paper plates down to flat. Now, the main reason that I do this is just because cutting them down to flat makes them easier to work with. You don't have to deal with any curved areas that you have to flatten out. Although if you're willing to fiddle with it, that's certainly the way to be the least wasteful. But once I got them cut down, you will notice that my plates, yours might be different, but my paper plates are gloss on one side and matte on the other. I'm going to make sure to texture the matte side of my plates because I don't want them to be glossy when I'm finished. If you were going to do some kind of like a tile roofing, it might actually be really cool to put the gloss side out. But for me and trying to do wood shingles, I'm going to want to stick to the matte side. Now to texture, I'm going to be first pulling out my steel wire brush. This is going to get me a much more fine wood grain in the paper, but you really have to press this in hard. I found the best way was to pinch the small end of the wire brush and then really scrape over the surface of the paper plate. This leaves a really nice texturing effect that honestly looks a lot like the result that I would get out of foam, except just less pronounced. It's not quite as three-dimensional, but when you think about the scale that the wood grain would be on these actual wooden shingles, it actually works really well. Once I have all of my pieces textured with the steel wire brush, then I'm gonna pull out the fork and I'm gonna go over the whole thing again. Big difference is that the fork is going to leave much deeper grooves, and I found that just the steel wire brush doesn't give me quite enough texture that when I'm dry brushing in way later steps, that I'm getting the right amount of 3D that I want from the shingles. I'm actually really pleased with the way that these have turned out with the two steps. I mean, it's not as easy to texture as foam, but there's no way you could cut foam this thin. And for correct scaling and size, these wooden shingles would be about this thin. Maybe this is even too big, I'm not sure, but they would be thinner. And I can't get that result with foam. The results that I see a lot of people doing foam shingles are much chunkier, they're much thicker, they look more cartoony, and I think that this looks a little bit less cartoony and looks a little more realistic. With the big pieces of paper plate all textured up, it was time to get them cut down into the size of shingles. The easiest way that I've found to do this is to use a ruler and a craft knife, but you could certainly do this with the scissors that we brought out earlier. It just all comes down to your preference on how you'd like to cut them into strips. Once they're all in strips, then it's time for the painstaking process of cutting them down into individual shingles, and scissors are the best way that I've come up with to do this, and there's no trick tip here. You just have to do it. I put on music and just enjoyed the music while I sat and did it. I kind of tranced and got it done. Similar to gluing bricks, but this is for some reason less fun to me than gluing bricks. So even though it took forever, eventually I got it knocked out, and then I had all my shingles ready to go. The next step is gluing, and I actually break out two different types of PVA glue for this step. I pull out Eileen's Tacky Glue and Elmer's Glue. I'll tell you why. I find that Eileen's Tacky Glue is thicker and therefore better for laying the shingles straight down. I like to also put a bead of glue in between the shingles, not just the shingles and the ceiling boards, but the shingles to other shingles. And I find that the Eileen's Tacky Glue is too thick and it creates like this kind of layer in between that I don't like. Elmer's Glue is a lot thinner than Eileen's Tacky Glue. It's less tacky, so it's not as good for applying it to the actual ceiling boards, but it is really good for being in between the two shingles. So for that reason, I break out both types. And then to get started, I just lay a big section of Eileen's Tacky Glue all across the boards. You don't want this to be too thick. If you make it too thick, then it's gonna be goopy and it's gonna squeeze out in between all of your shingles, and that's no fun because then you gotta clean it up. So you wanna find where that balance is. I can't tell you what that balance is for you because I barely know it for me, but eventually once you get into a rhythm, you kind of figure out exactly how much you should have on there. Once the glue's on there, it's time to just start laying shingles. I go row at a time, and as soon as I finish a row, it's gonna look something like this, and that's great, but now it's time to put on the next row. So what I'm gonna do is run that bead, like I said, of Elmer's Glue across, and then I made sure to stagger my shingles so that obviously where two meet below, a flat one will meet on top. That helps to make the roof watertight, and that's of course how roofs are done. So you want to do that, otherwise it would look strange if all of the lines all lined up. Now again, for this step, I will say if I had a trick to make this go super fast, I would blow up the crafting world and be famous everywhere. There just isn't. You just have to do it, and it takes a long time, and that sucks. But if you can find a way to make it fun for yourself, or find something else fun to do while you're doing this, I think that that makes it so much better. So for example, as I was doing all of this, I actually called a DM friend of mine and we talked about his current game and what's going on in his current game and what his players are up to and what kind of story points he's trying to get them towards. And for me, I was gonna have that conversation with him anyway, so that was something that I could do, that I could be talking to him, and then doing this doesn't take a whole lot of brain power, it just takes time. So eventually I got that side finished, and then up at the top I ran all of my shingles long, just because it's easy to come back in with a craft knife at the end of the process and trim those all down to flat. Once I had that done, I did the exact same thing for side 2, and then I eventually got the piece finished. And I'll say, I hate shingling. I really do, but every time it's finished, it makes me wish that I didn't hate shingling so bad, or at least getting started with shingling so bad, because it really is the best look. I want to say something more poetic here, but there isn't anything. It's just really the best look. It looks fantastic, and particularly if you leave these areas where some of the shingles have flaked off, that just always ends up looking so cool. For me, I'm glad that I did it. Okay, isn't it how it literally always goes? I literally cut enough shingles to get it that I am like 6 short. In the intro, I joked about this video being a punishment because I was dragging my feet and not getting stuff done on my buildings that I have sitting around, and that's kind of true, but the truth of the matter is whatever you come up with to keep yourself working and getting stuff done in the hobby is all you can ask for. I mean, I've watched a bunch of Trapped Under Plastic, Miniac's podcast, listening to him talk. It's just always something new each week about how he's tricking himself into painting more or being more excited about learning a new technique. I have the luxury of all of your time and attention, and I can use that to my advantage to make myself get stuff like this done. And I'm gonna be working on this house for a little bit because I'm really pleased with how it is coming out, and I think that once it's done, it's gonna be a real banger of a piece. So I'm gonna work on this for a little bit, I think, and hopefully you all enjoy the ride. So with that said, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, definitely subscribe to the channel. If you haven't, leave me a like down below, a comment down below. The #1 way that you can help a small YouTube channel is to share this video with a friend that you think would enjoy it or is silly enough to spend hours and hours gluing little tiny paper plate shingles onto their foam buildings. But that's it for this week, so thank you so much for watching, and until next week, I'll be seeing you. Turning out really nice. It is worth it. The time is worth it. It is worth it.